I remember distinctly watching a Back to the Future Part 2 behind-the-scenes featurette that made it seem like, at least in my mind, that hoverboards were real.
And I remember going to the toy store, and I was like, it's just a freaking skateboard. This ain't no hoverboard.
Apparently, time-traveling movies were my thing.
Okay.
It fascinated me, and it just clicked with me that it's like all these little paradoxes, all these little things that Doc would talk about and Marty would talk about and all that. I fed on that. They used this movie also to jump back into the first movie.
Right.
So you see different scenes closer to the end that are from a different vantage point, you know? And it's just cool to watch that. I was reading just this afternoon about the leading up to making Back to the Future 2. In Back to the Future 1, they started out at the end as like a joke gimmick ending. Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis didn't plan on going into the future.
One and done.
When the movie execs wanted a sequel because they owned the franchise now. You can either be a part of this or we'll find someone else to do Back to the Future Part 2 because it's going to happen.
This is happening.
It took a little time before Back to the Future Part 2 came on the screens. And you would think within a year's time that Back to the Future 2 would come out. But it didn't.
Right.
And it wasn't until 1989 that we actually got the sequel to it. One of the things was Robert Zemeckis was working for Disney to bring Who Framed Roger Rabbit to life.
Right.
You also had Christopher Lloyd,
Who was in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Judge Doom. Mm-hmm. Both people were tied up doing that. So in the meantime, Bob Gale was alone trying to write the sequel. There were some interesting things that he wrote about the sequel. Much of it was the same, except for instead of going back into 1955 to get the almanac back from Biff, it was 1967. And they did make it back to back as well.
Right. Yeah, and over an 11-month period, they made Part 2 and Part 3 with just a 3-week break in between the two movies. As time has gone on, and the more I've come back to revisit Part 2, I do enjoy it more and more. So, I mean, I would have been 9 years old and playing with whatever toys I had. Yeah. But yeah, it's there was a few changes in Part 2 from Part 1. Had a few actors, you know, get replaced.
Right.
Of course, Crispin Glover, that's the one that was the most notorious. He so apparently had a difference of opinion as to how the first one should have ended. He wanted it to end to be more focused on love being the reward and family and instead of material wealth. Right. So when Marty came back and again in Part 2, you know, that was you know, the alternate version. And of course his girlfriend, the actual actress from Part 1, her mom became ill in real life. So she decided to not be a part of Part 2 or the rest of the franchise, so they had to replace her, and they were already, Zemeckis and Gale were already committed to having her in it because they ended the first movie with her getting in the car too. Right. So then they had to figure out a way to write her in the movie but also out of the movie at the same time. So, which I guess adds a layer of the paradox in there, right? You know, how do we fix this mistake? So.
Did you notice the change?
At the time, no. Now, yes. I mean, I'm great with faces. I can remember someone's face from 20 years ago. So, yeah, when I was a child, no, I would probably not have put it together.
I did notice Jennifer as being a different actress. But I want to say that the switch between Crispin Glover
I did not notice that.
And the Jeffrey Wiseman, that was a little bit different. That was a little bit harder to differentiate.
Right, and that was by design. You know, they obscured his face for parts of the movie, made him upside down for the dinner scene, you know, and put makeup on him and made him up to look like Crispin Glover, which up until that point, I guess, wasn't illegal and it wasn't unethical in the Hollywood scene. And it's interesting to me, that was the catalyst for him suing them for using his likeness.
Yeah.
And he won, and that changed Hollywood in that respect. That, after that, an actor, they had to give permission.
Yeah, and I guess that also plays into the use of CGI and AI, de-aging people, using a character who the actor has passed away, But one of the funny things about Crispin, he was notorious, of course, for not standing in his mark. They need you to stand in the exact spot. And of course the directors and whoever, so that you're in focus, look good, and the composition between you and the other person looks good, and everything like that. And so one of the things that if he were to agree to appear in Back to the Future 2, he would be stuck in a contraption. So eliminating some of the issues that they had with him.
Yeah.
But,
and according to him, because I've watched some of this, background just to figure it all out, the interviews that I've seen with him is he says that he was offered, I think it was $125,000 for the role, and that was half of what some of the other actors were being offered for similar screen time and similar role capacity.
I think, the future part of it, of them going in the future, that is what I loved about the movie. The alternate 1985 I wasn't really a big fan of that part. Probably a little bit more boring to me because it was just a little bit darker,
Oh, it was a lot. Yeah, it was gangster. It was, I mean, the neighborhood looked like a demilitarized zone. I mean, it looked bad. I actually rewatched part 2 and part 3 back to back last night.
Yeah.
And when it was at that part, I thought, good grief, that looks terrible. There was that one family that was on the street, and it happened to be in the house that he used to live in.
Yeah.
So when he goes back there and he breaks into the house because he thinks, oh, they locked me out, no, come to find out that's somebody else's house. And he's going, oh, I'm in the wrong house. And he goes, yeah, you are. This is a mistake. Yeah, it was.
You tell that realtor that we ain't selling.
That's right. That's right. He was the one holdout in the neighborhood for some reason.
Right.
Don't know why you would want to raise your children in that place, but whatever. I guess if that's all you had.
So you got to see Hill Valley and all the other places that you've seen in the movies, in different time periods, as well as, different deteriorated, forms, and so
different timelines.
Yeah. So you get to see in the first movie the Hill Valley School, brand new, and then you get to see you get to see it, in the 1985 where, grime and stuff, and just the age of the building shows, and then you get to see the futuristic Hill Valley, which looks a lot better than the 1985 version, and almost comparable to 1955 with it being squeaky clean almost,
Right.
And so you've got hoverboards.
I could go on about hoverboards.
Well,
Sorry, keep going.
I can too. I remember distinctly watching a Back to the Future Part 2 behind the scenes featurette that made it seem like, at least in my mind, that hoverboards were real.
They were legit. Yeah, I remember watching one. And I remember going to the toy store and looking at it, and it said hoverboard on it, and it was everything that was in the movie, and I was like, it's just a freaking skateboard. So you got wheels on it. This ain't no hoverboard.
I looked at it and I begged to get it, and never got it. And
skateboards were a little risky.
Well, I really thought that it was a hoverboard. I guess I didn't see the wheels, in the packaging.
I remember. I was like on a mission to get this thing that floated on the ground. Like, are you for real? I can get one of these and take it home?
I remember seeing it in the toy store once. And then after that, never saw it again.
Right.
Another product that never existed was Pepsi Perfect.
Okay,
now,
right.
you know, in the cafe, you know, sequence
just want a
where
Pepsi.
it's the
Yeah, and it pops
cafe
up.
80s, you know. So, you know, the one thing that they really got right back in 2015, now 2015 is the past
Sure.
and not the future, was the nostalgia factor of things. And so they had all things 80s. They had the Wild Gun.
80s was
you
a
know,
fun decade.
The Wild Gun arcade game. That's what it's called.
Which
right?
actually never
Yeah.
existed. That was a prop.
Really?
That was a prop made specifically for the movie. Nintendo had not released that game whenever the movie came out.
I never realized that.
That they put that whole arcade game together just for the movie, just for the precursor of Part 3.
Yeah. Okay.
To show where he got his skills from when he was shooting the gun.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Elijah Wood was one of the kids
Yeah.
at the arcade game. I think that's pretty well known. But that was his first movie role. And they, you know, I think it's funny that when they found out that you had to use your hands for the gun, they're like, that's lame. You know?
And, you know, that kind of makes sense now because when the Nintendo Wii came
Right.
out, you had wireless remotes, and it's kind of like, you know, you were using your hands, but you weren't, you know, in a way. It's kind of, you know, kind of true, you know, that you got to use your hands.
Right.
There's a lot of things that they kind of got right and kind of didn't get right. But yeah, the Pepsi Perfect. I just loved how this looked, you know. And so...
To me, that looks like a shampoo bottle.
Well, yeah, it could be. But, you know...
Mouthwash, maybe.
This is actually real Pepsi here. But it's not Pepsi Perfect as in I guess Pepsi Perfect would be no calories.
It never explained
no
it.
Sugar,
I never saw what it was about. Right.
But tasting. This is what I had in my head, you know, even today, what Pepsi Perfect is. No calories, no sugar, but it tastes exactly like Pepsi.
How old is that?
I think they made this probably a little bit before 2015.
Okay, so you should crack it open, man. Drink it. Let's see what it tastes like.
No.
Come on.
This is
it's
regular
11 years
Pepsi,
old, right? Just drink it up.
I'm sure over time it will get clearer and clearer and clearer until it becomes Pepsi Perfect Crystal.
Okay,
Pepsi,
right,
you know?
right. I remember that.
Crystal Pepsi Perfect.
Okay. The 80s was a fun decade. I understand why they went with that nostalgic decade look for the 80s diner. You know, you had the TVs that came down and they took your order. And, you know, of course, some of them were like a throwback to the MTV days.
Yeah.
You know,
and you kind of had like, I want to say AI on there. You know, you had like an AI Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, you know, and of course nobody knew that Michael Jackson would be deceased by then, or Princess Diana. I think there is either on the newspaper, one of the newspapers, or somewhere on there. There's a Princess.
There's
Princess
references to her, but
yeah.
she's like scheduling a visit.
Right.
So it's like she's still alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually paused it and read some of the headlines and everything on that paper. So in 2015, they had us having, you know, a female president. They wanted the headlines to be sensational on the paper, you know, like these outlandish stories. One of them was a man died whenever litter fell on his head from a hovercraft above.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So that, you don't think about it, but yeah, you got hover cars going in the sky. It's like anybody that throws anything else, like, oh, I'm done with this. And then it clobs you in the head and you're dead.
Or even gum, you know, throwing gum out the window.
Right. A penny, you know, from a couple 100 feet up, that would hurt. Be like a bullet hitting the ground.
I'm pretty glad now that we don't have flying cars.
Right.
Because that would be some of the things that you'd run into it.
Right. What was interesting to me is when Doc goes back and gets Marty and Jennifer, and then they come back and they're immediately flying up in the sky on the highway, and she starts asking all these questions. So he zaps her with this light. It's like an algorithm. He calls it some sort of algorithmic sleep device or something like
Yeah.
that. So it knocks her out. So that was their convenient way to get her out of the story,
Right.
so that they could just shove her off to the side in an alley next to the laser discs and be done with her.
Speaking of laser discs, I wanted this for my collection because, of course, laser discs were featured in Back to the Future Part 2. And this is a laser disc of Back to the Future Part 2.
Okay.
And so had to have this little piece.
Do you have a laser disc player?
I don't.
Okay.
This is a new piece of technology. And it's so much clearer, and it has menus, and it's great for learning tools and stuff like that. I only remember seeing the laser disc once in schools, and it kind of once or twice, and that was in middle school.
Right.
And it was during this time frame, 89, 88, 89, 90s, early 90s. But we were expected to have these laser disc players, for 30 years into the future, and it just didn't happen. One of the other predictions in the future was that Jaws would be really, really, really successful and never die.
Right.
And so here we have a movie poster of Jaws 19. This time it's really, really personal. And directed by Max Spielberg, his son.
Correct. Which, according to what I've seen, when they filmed Part 2, Max Spielberg would have been like 6 months old or something like that. He was like, just a baby.
Yeah.
They included that in there as like a spoof to franchises.
Right.
Like when is enough enough? You've made 19 movies about this shark. So.
Even though it's a book, it's antagonist, of the movie.
The Gray Sports Almanac.
The Gray Sports Almanac.
Right.
Almanac from 1950 to the year 2000. Now, of course, it was 1989 when this movie came out, so this book obviously couldn't be completed until 2000. And so I actually bought the book this last year. And this is actually a real almanac. It has all the sports scores, from 1950 to 2000.
Okay. I expected it to be blank and just be a cover and be a prop.
Of different,
Yeah, it does.
sports, rodeos, darts,
Everything.
whatever,
Swimming.
diving, football scores, ice skating. And, of course, it has a nice jacket like the 1980s did.
So you can put your Ooh La La edition in there.
Your Ooh La La. But there's a store in town that I pass all the time, and it has on the sign Ooh La La. And I just go back to the Future too.
Right.
Oh, ooh la la, ooh la la. Marty is actually going to use this to make a few bucks on the side. What's the matter with that?
Right.
And of course, that goes back to the original movie where Doc mentioned something about making some money on the side, but then Doc is dead set against Marty doing this. And so Biff hears all this. The police discover Jennifer lying in the alley and take her to her future home.
Right.
Since her thumbprint doesn't change over the years, they assume that she's the Jennifer of the future. What's funny about that scene is when they see each other, the old Jennifer and the new the young Jennifer. The young Jennifer says, "I'm old,"
Right.
and then the old Jennifer says, "I'm young."
Yeah, and then they both
And
fall
they
out.
both fall out. Put your thumb to the plate,
Right.
to get out, of the house. And so that's something that is pretty much true. You have fobs, that, or you could. There probably is a fingerprint, access
totally.
point.
There's biometric, door locks.
And of course, you got your iPhone. Fingerprint there and face print, that type of thing.
So they had the wall-sized TV, which of course now we have, movie theater size screens that you can get for your home. And Then they had the home that greets you, you know, the digital home.
Welcome home,
Yeah,
Jennifer.
so now they have stuff like that, of course. And then the one thing that I'm kind of glad that they don't have is the pizza. What do they got?
Hydrator?
Yeah, the hydrator. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, she just puts in this little tiny little disc.
Rehydrate level 4, please.
Nobody can hydrate a pizza like you.
Why don't you just shove it in my mouth?
Yeah, yeah. So,
But here, I think it was the 2015 George McFly Jeffrey, who was at Pensacon.
okay.
He was selling these. So I had to get one. It's the dehydrated Pizza Hut, half pepperoni, half green pepper. So that was the. So you know you open it up and you know you had Lorraine, you know, open it up with her mouth and just shove it in my mouth. Don't be a smartass.
So for this movie, they actually had Pizza Hut on site with their oven making pizzas so that for every scene it actually looked appealing.
Yeah.
I did like the fruit thing that, you know, that he said, you know, fruit tray or whatever, and then it came down from the
Fruit,
ceiling.
please.
Yeah, and then he, you know, got the grapes off of it, and I'm like, wow.
Retract!
That all looks pretty good. So I'm wondering, did they, and I actually had this thought, did they have like a little microclimate where they grew their own grapes and fruits like inside of that and it was built into the home? Or was it something that they just went and got grapes once a week, brought them back and stocked it up there and it kept them fresh for the week? I thought that Michael J. Fox did a good job at playing multiple characters in that, because that was the old school way. He had to play them all legitimately. And then, like a couple hours later, be in different character and everything, and play the other role.
He played his son and his daughter. And so they had developed even technology with the cameras, you know, so that the camera could move the same way each take.
Right.
Before, when the same actor shared the same space with themselves, the camera would have to stay still, and there was a line of blending that both, you know, takes would have where you couldn't go past.
Okay.
Otherwise, you know, it would be half of one video and half of the other interacting.
Right.
But they developed it where you could actually walk behind yourself or in front of yourself. You could actually hand something to yourself and yourself on the other side take it back.
Right.
And so...
Cool.
But yeah.
I think it was interesting that they directly created Biff's 1985 alternate Biff's character off of Donald Trump. The hair and the bigger than life, you know, persona, and the hotel and the businessman, you know,
Biffco.
type of, just all of it was named after him. And
a Biff-topia, you know, which was not a utopia.
And again, you've got some Biff dollars. You got a Biff dollar somewhere here.
Biff dollar, right here.
Yep. There it is.
So you got the hairstyle there, and then
the cigar.
They use this type of gimmick, you know, putting people on the $1 bill.
Okay.
I'll go back to Batman.
Of course. Why wouldn't we?
1989 movie Batman, where the Joker puts his face on the $1 bill.
But yeah, I liked that they made Biff the villain in part 2. I liked the fact that it had a villain that, of course, he was sort of the villain in part 1. Really, part 1, the main character, the main story was around Crispin Glover, his character, the dad. Got to get Dad, because Dad was supposed to be the one that got hit by the car. You know, so it's like Michael J. Fox, like Marty McFly's character is kind of just, instead of all of the everything circling around him, he circles around the main story and the plots, and he's got to figure out what he needs to do.
Yeah.
So in part one, it was, his dad's character. He's got to get his dad and his mom to be together. In part two, it's definitely Biff. So he's having to deal with Biff at every phase of it.
Right.
From the very beginning, where he sees them take off in the DeLorean, to in 2015, whenever old Biff overhears, gets the almanac out of the trash, takes it, the time machine, and goes and gives it to young Biff. So then Marty's got to go back to young Biff and deal with that and get it. And then so part two is definitely it's a Biff story.
Yeah. And I would say that Biff throughout the whole three movies is the villain, no matter what. No matter, he appears to be good in the real 1985, but that's only because he's sucking up, I think, to the McFlys, because they, George, dished him one, and
Put him in his place, yeah.
Put him in his place, so he'd rather be in power underneath somebody, I think,
Well, I mean, he had his car detailing business, and he was, that he was at their house detailing their cars. So I mean, that he was, they were the boss.
Yeah.
So.
But yet, I don't think his attitude ever changed. I don't think there was any redemptive qualities to him, because when you see the DeLorean leave to go to the future, he walks out. He sees it, and he's like, what the hell is going on here?
There was a serious injury when they made this movie.
Yeah.
One of the stunt people, the stunt woman, in the scene where Marty gets the hoverboard, he's trying to escape, young Biff, and he's got his hoverboard, and he's like, hook on! And they grab the little tethers, and they put them on their hands, which it didn't make sense to me, because then they would be fighting against that and trying to pull their feet forward.
Yeah.
They should have just hooked it onto their boards, but I wasn't there. They didn't ask me. So, when Biff and whatever his is called, so when they're going across the water, and then Marty jumps down into the water, and so
Pitbull.
the pit bull. So whenever Biff swings and misses, and then they go into the building, into the courthouse through the glass. If you go back and watch it, the chick hits the pillar on her side, and it's one of the wires. She either got hung up on it or something happened, and she hit that. And so when she went through the glass or whatever it was, she didn't land on her mark on the padding. She fell 30 feet and hit the ground and got seriously injured and had to go to the hospital and recover. And of course, she did make a full recovery, and she wasn't in that movie anymore. But she did, from my understanding, she did go back to doing stunt work. So, and it turns out that that's the event. That fixes his son's issue. His son doesn't go to jail, because he doesn't commit the crime, but then the dad does. So I think that it's weird is they saved young Marty, but then old Marty gets talked into making an illegal transaction by a coworker, and then his boss was monitoring it. So immediately, they send him,
you're fired.
Yeah, you're fired. Look, see my fax.
Custo.
And I thought that was absurd. I was like, this house has 2 or 3 fax machines all sitting next to each other.
In the closet, too.
On the wall.
In the closet where Jennifer is.
How many pieces of paper do you need to tell you the same thing in your house? Because, when it spit it out in one scene, there was 2 of them, 2 or 3 in the same room next to each other. I'm like, when you get a fax, we don't do faxes anymore, but when you did,
and that's one of the things that they got wrong too. That the fax machine wasn't going to be the thing, that was going to be giving you information.
Right. I think it's interesting though that the fax that came through that said you're fired was tying into part 3.
Yeah.
at the very end of part 3, whenever she's Jennifer's asking Doc, everything that happened, and she's got the piece of paper, and it's still got the letterhead on there.
It erased.
But the words went away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought it was interesting that this high-tech house that talked to you when you came in and had all these different channels on the TV, and you could hydrate pizza and all, the fruit came down from the ceiling, but they still used faxes that printed out a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So anyways, whatever.
Yep. But then, along with the almanac, this comes into play because when they're in the alternate 1985, they've got to figure out when, where, and what day.
Old Biff gave
Biff,
young Biff
yeah.
the magazine. Yeah.
And so they discovered, of course, that he had the almanac in his, pants pocket.
Right.
Then when they're back in Doc's, place, he knows that Biff had stolen the time machine because of this and the receipt.
Right. It was, so the receipt, and then it was part of his cane.
The knocker.
The top on his cane. Yeah.
Hello, McFly, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I love this bag, though. It's the rainbow type.
Yeah, it's wild.
Look to
it's got a lot of colors coming.
And then you've got the see-through receipt, which, of course, the taxi driver, he has a mobile, pay device, that you pay with.
Right.
So we've got those, and so it would have been great if they could have predicted the smartphone, in that movie. But I mean, who knows?
Can't get them all right.
Who knows what was developed because of Back to the Future Part 2? The ideas.
I'm sure a lot of people took inspiration from it. Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, if anybody has an answer to that, leave it in the comments.
Sure.
Because that would be fascinating to know that, Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis, did this, and because of this, this was invented or this was developed or whatever, So
right.
I'm glad we don't have flying cars. I loved it when the DeLorean could fly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was super
and all the effects,
the special effects were next level. They really were. They had me fooled. I mean, I tried to look for flaws, and I couldn't see any of the strings. I couldn't see anything holding it up, but of course it's all there. They just take it out in post.
He burns the book, and Marty's like, you don't want to get struck by lightning. And so
lightning hit close.
Right.
And then he was like, whoa, that was close.
But then lightning hits the DeLorean, causes it to speed up, I guess.
Right then. It
up
gives
to
it the
88 miles an
whatever
hour.
it is, gigawatts.
And it was a wild...
1.21 gigawatts, right?
1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah.
And so you see these tire flames go...
It looks like a 99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's just wild how a car would shoo,
right,
and then just
disappear. Yeah.
And then of course the lightning probably burned off the flag thing.
Yeah, because when it hit the ground, the end of it was smoking whenever Marty picked it up. I remember that. And then it started raining.
It started raining, and then a car pulls up, and it's Western Union.
Yep.
And of course, back then, Western Union was a delivery service. Now I think it's...
You just send money.
It's money. It's you get money from it, or you send money, and it's whatever you call it, But back then it was, it was like the post office.
Right.
Except for probably better, It's been around probably longer. But then I've got the letter that 1985 Doc writes.
When he's back
in the Old West.
75 years, whatever it was in the past, yes.
And so I thought it was just clever writing,
Right.
that not just the letter, but just he probably told Western Union, this is a science experiment, and I want to see if, a person named Marty is actually going to be there in 1955, November 12th, 1955, at this exact time. And just a fun thing, so
Right.
that they don't think he's crazy, back in 1885. But I'm sure a lot of people probably thought Doc was crazy back then,
Right.
possibly.
Yep.
And so Marty reads the letter. In this copy here, it even has like the wet drop marks, of the rain, hitting the.
There was a lot of rain. That was
There's
an
a
issue
lot
that
of rain,
I
yeah.
took issue with that part.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, he's going to read this thing when it's pouring rain and the ink's not going to run. And I'm like, okay, well, this is why would you use something so important?
70-year paper is
Yeah,
going
and
to
you're
tear
gonna
apart.
you're gonna let it just disintegrate.
But apparently,
So-
paper was made better back then.
I guess so, because in the next part of it, when so he goes after that, after Doc disappears at the end and the lightning bolt, then Marty runs back to downtown, finds 1955 Doc, tells him, and then, hey, I'm back from the future, and then he passes out and then wakes up at his house, and then, it get kind of just...
Well, it ends in part 2 with him running out there saying, "I'm back from the future."
Right.
And then he goes,
and then
"Great
it
Scott."
shows
And then,
the trailer for part 3.
Right.
It shows what's coming up. And that was, they broke the mold when they did that.
Yeah.
No other movie had set up the third part or the next part at the end of the part.
I can't recall any other movie since then.
No, to package it in like that.
Now,
I thought that was
they
smart.
do fun little scenes like at the end of the Avengers movies and
Marvel,
other things like that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
they don't preview the next
next movie, right.
Yeah. But it's fun that they revisited all these scenes from Back to the Future Part 1. Especially the clock tower scene, and they interspliced, the new scenes that they filmed with Marty coming, saying that he's back, from the future and all that. And it was just, you see Doc's expression and disbelief, when Marty comes back, because I just sent you back to the future.
Right. He can't wrap his head around the fact that he did something and now Marty's immediately back.
And he just faints. And here we're left, in suspense, and it says to be concluded,
Right.
One of the things, though, that they did do to the original Back to the Future was that in the theater, it did not say to be continued at the very end.
Right, because they didn't want it to be any
Right.
trilogy or anything.
But when it hit VHS,
Yes.
it was already made for sure that they were going to do Back to the Future Part 2.
So they put to be continued. And that's how Michael J. Fox found out that there was going to be more.
Yeah.
And so he immediately calls his agent and he's like, hey, I'm in this, right? And they're like, yeah, you're good. So, yeah, could you imagine, that's how you find out, is how everybody else finds out. You're watching it at home. You're like, what?
Yes. But yeah, the future bit was my favorite part as a kid. I guess the ending part, where they were back in 1955. And then you had some extra scenes, too, that kind of fleshed out the story. When Biff actually gets the book, and of course he was harassing Lorraine, with the dress. You would look good with nothing at all on, and type of thing, when they were picking up the dresses for the prom, the enchantment under the sea dance,
Right.
or the fish under the sea.
Yeah, I forget what it was called, but yeah.
It's the enchantment under the sea. And here we conclude it with Marty being trapped in 1955 again.
Right.
And so, of course, in the letter it says his, counterpart would be able to fix the DeLorean that was left in 1885. A 70-year-old car.
That he'd hidden in a cave. Yeah, for him.
And trusting that nobody ever found it between, 1885 to 1955.
Right.
and that no rodents or any creatures,
Went in there and chewed the wires
Yeah,
or
yeah.
made it home.
right.
Yeah.
But we'll leave that conversation for part 3.
Part 3. I'm ready. I'm excited.
So we'll see you then.